All right, first let's start with Putin. How scared should I be? We get two messages from today that I think resonated. One, Ukraine is Russia. They all know it, he said, obviously justifying his efforts towards agglomeration, rebuilding the bloc. Second, I'm no longer following the nuclear treaty. Everything's on the table. What do you take away from it? What is the concern?
Well, on the first point, Chris, the Ukrainians know that they are a nation, they are a people, they have a culture, they have their language, they have a history that goes back farther than the Russian history. So the Ukrainians know who they are, and they really know who they don't like, and that's Putin, and that's the Russians. And it didn't used to be that way, Chris. It used to be that the Ukrainians and Russians in most of that country got along fine. Now, after Putin's invasion, both starting in 2014 and now the big one in 2022, last year, continuing to today, the Ukrainians hate the Russians.
And again, two things can be true at once, right, Ambassador? You've told me this once before. The farther you go east, some of those border places, you do have a lot of cultural Russians who, even though they want to be in Ukraine, because that's where they are, have different feelings in terms of how bad it would be to have Russia have more of an influence over their lives. But it doesn't mean they don't believe they're Ukrainian, and it doesn't mean that they're the majority. But on the nuclear side, that seems to be something where he is going to now create a dynamic where you see what you did, America? You're making it worse. How does America play it?
So the right way to think about the nuclear is in two pieces. There is the New START treaty. This is a topic today, and he says he's not going to abide by the New START treaty any longer. He mainly means, apparently, that he's not going to allow inspections of his nuclear forces. Now, these forces under New START are strategic. These are the intercontinental ballistic missiles. These are the cruise missiles that carry nuclear weapons all around the globe, all the way around the globe. These are strategic nuclear weapons that are covered by and constrained by the New START treaty. And what he said, he's not going to let people in the U.S. and others inspect his forces. That's different, Chris, from what we've been talking about for the last 12 months, which is tactical nuclear weapons that President Putin every now and then rattles the saber. Every now and then he talks about just to remind us that he's got nuclear weapons. And people then say, if he's put in a bind, if he's put in a corner, backed into a corner, he might use those. These are the short range. These are the small nuclear weapons. He won't use those either. On the long term, on the long range weapons, he's not crazy. He's not suicidal. He's not going to start a war that he will clearly lose and annihilate himself. That's not going to happen. On the short range that we have been talking about, he's not talking about today, but on the short range that we have talked about, he's not going to use them either. I think that's very, very low probability.
Well, look, he's been losing for so long there that if he was going to use them, he had his window. I said SALT earlier, I meant START, just some treaties to keep together. And also, the answer I've been giving people in terms of, well, how do you know he's not crazy? Look what he did already. Hey, he had Zelensky and Biden right on an open plaza in the middle of Kyiv. If he wanted to do something crazy that was a true act of aggression, he had his opportunity. He didn't take it. Now, last thing for you, Ambassador, very hard pushback here in the United States. This is another Afghanistan, Iraq gambit, just throwing us into a situation where we don't belong, wasting our treasure, hopefully not our blood, and getting nothing for it. This is more of the same. Avoid it. Your pushback.
Pushback hard, pushback very hard. So Ukraine matters to the Ukrainians because they want to live in a democracy. They want to live in a European democracy. Ukraine matters to the Europeans because Ukraine is the defense against an aggressive Russia. Ukraine matters to us, to the United States. And we can do both. We can do domestic things and we can do overseas things. And Ukraine is the most important thing to do overseas right now for our own security. Our own security. If Ukraine loses, if the Russians are able to take Ukraine, they threaten us. They threaten the NATO alliance. They threaten our allies. They threaten the possibility of us having to go to Europe with our forces. The Ukrainians are fighting the Russians to prevent that. The Ukrainians are fighting so they can have a democracy, that they can live in peace without the Russians on their soil, and we're helping them. And we can do that. We can do it. Last thing, Chris, last beat. So we are spending less than 5% of our overall defense budget to support Ukraine. They are fighting the Russians for us. We can do this.
Hey, thank you for watching. Please go to newsnationnow.com, newsnationnow.com, and you can find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button down below. Then you will get more of NewsNation's fact-driven coverage.